Well, guys, this topic is it's controversial, I guess you could say. Maybe it's gonna be more of an education segment for a lot of people. There's a way that a lot of people can be accidentally killing all of their deer. So one thing that hunters, wildlife lovers tend to do later in the year, as the whitetail's metabolism slows down and their body starts to change, they start to feel bad for these deer. Oh, they're out in the elements, it's freezing cold out there, we need to feed these deer. Well, we need to be careful with it because biologically, these deer, their metabolism changes, slows down, and their diet requirements also change and slow down. This is how they actually, they survive. If their bodies wouldn't do this, and they had to eat the same amount all throughout the entire year, they would not survive because there's less food for deer, obviously, in the late season, into the winter, before early spring. So if deer never were able to adapt over time, there's a good chance that there wouldn't be deer anymore. So with that being said, we see this as hunters, we see this as wildlife lovers, and we're like, we have to feed these deer. Well, we can definitely kill these deer by feeding these deer. What? Yes, you can. So the most readily available food source that we think of as deer hunters when it comes to we gotta feed our deer is corn. So now something happens when you feed corn to a lot of deer, or to deer late in the season. So as I stated earlier, these deer, their body changes. They have different requirements later in the season. And giving them a high carbohydrate starchy meal can hurt the deer. What do you mean, Brett? How is this possible? When you feed a deer a high carbohydrate diet late in the year, after their body and the metabolism is already slowed down, and you shock their system with large amounts of food all in one place, you can create something called rumen acidosis. So rumen acidosis is basically caused for that reason. These deer slow down throughout the year, their body slows down, and now we give them these carbohydrate meals, these high starchy meals that are super attractive, and all the deer are going to come to them, but on accident, these deer could gorge themselves literally to death because their body cannot digest at that point of the season tons of carbohydrates and starches. So what can we do? Now a lot of you are thinking, well, what does this mean? Like I just can't bait anymore late in the season. My state allows me to supplemental feed. I shouldn't be, I just can't do it now, even though it's legal. Wrong. There is something that we can do. So when we think about, I guess, diet advice, or we talk about stuff as humans, there's three different categories that we like to touch on. There's the carbs. We kind of know those as the bad, the bad things if you're trying to get in shape and lose weight. The fats and the proteins. The safest thing to be feeding your deer is protein. It's much more digestible, and ultimately probably the most important when it comes to actually replenishing your deer over time, and it's the safest. So normally I'm looking at something with a crude protein percentage around 20%. That's of degradable and undegradable protein, basically mixed to create crude protein. So it's just a safer option. Basically, you have a way less chance of hurting your deer late in the season and ultimately accidentally killing your deer. So that's one thing that a lot of people don't think about is giving these deer the corn and the starchy foods late in the year, the starchy food sources. I feel like I'm talking about humans here. And it can hurt them. And I understand it's the most readily available food source that we think that we can get our hands on to feed these deer, but it might not be the best. Something that I use a lot of late in the year, especially where it's legal, and you can supplementally feed your deer on harsh winters. I'm using something high protein. I'm normally using some sort of product from Big & J. So once again, this Big & J, I'm looking at the bag right now. The crude protein is right around 20%. Your fat, which is probably the next most important at that time of the year, around 7.5%. There are also minerals in this that are going to help replenish the deer throughout the season as well. So, and through that later portion of the season. So at the end of the day, we really got to think about it as habitat managers, as wildlife lovers. If you really love these deer, you got to be able to do the research and know what's best for them. when it comes to feeding deer late in the season, feeding them a high carbohydrate meal might not be the best for them. For me personally, I'm sticking with a high protein meal when it comes to feeding deer. So if you guys like the information that you are getting from these videos, make sure you like and subscribe. We're gonna keep putting out a bunch of videos for you guys in the coming months and coming days. So if you like what you're hearing, make sure you like and subscribe.